Today I'm just going to be talking to you about at Council how we're harnessing AI and drones in the use in the use case of feral deer management. I'm not going to be just talking about feral deer management. I'm going to be kind of interchanging between feral deer management and invasive species management. So I just wanted to start off with three key messages. And if you kind of fall asleep during the presentation, because I am the last one, as long as you kind of remember these three, I'll be happy. So the first one is the major challenge is obviously invasive species. And in my view, the big challenge really is leadership in this space. So we need more leaders in invasive species management thinking about these problems. And I've put in brackets there resourcing, because in my mind, if you've got really good leadership, then resourcing naturally follows. I've heard resourcing talked about a few times today, and it is really important. But if you can sell your message well enough, then the resourcing will follow. And then the second point that I want you to remember today is that when we went to look for methodologies for feral deer management on the Gold Coast, what we noticed is there was lots of research out there. And so what we did is we went out and tried to find some research or some methodologies that really did, match what we were trying to do. So my point there is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to go out and get consultants to develop new methodologies. There's good methodologies out there for invasive species management. And then finally, my last point is the big opportunity is combining existing methodologies with new tech and leadership. And in that way, we can really accelerate and protect nature. And so my whole point to the presentation is that change is coming fast and we should lead it. And you can see there, I've got a lovely AI photograph that took me about 3 seconds. So all of the photos here are done by AI, Microsoft AI. So that's pretty cool. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the why. So why are we talking about this? Why is invasive species management so important? And the reason is because biodiversity is in decline globally, and invasive species is the second largest threat to biodiversity globally. And so the first thing is, most people will know here, I'm probably preaching to the converted, but the biggest impact is land use change, and that's things like deforestation. But most people don't realise is invasive species is the second largest threat. And then thirdly, just focusing on feral deer in terms of the why, it's largely to do with ecological damage and vehicle strike. And that was a big one for our councillors, our elected representatives in particular, was the vehicle strike one, and that's human safety. And then I just wanted to talk about quickly what we're doing. So we have a large Vector and Biosecurity business unit, and the business unit really does deliver a lot of services. It delivers fire ant management, it delivers invasive species management, plants and animals. And also we have a large unit that delivers vector services, so mosquito management. And we also have urban pest management too. So specifically in the area of monitoring feral deer, you may or may not have seen in the media recently, we've got a new program running. Some controversial stuff happened before that too, where there was discussion about whether the council was going to use aerial culling or not, and that was just a bit of a media beat up. But essentially what we've got to now is we're currently this winter monitoring 4,300 hectares of feral deer habitat, and you can see the photo to the right there. That gives you just a snippet of one of the areas that we're monitoring. And that specific area is Nerang Conservation Park, and keen-eyed people might realise that that's actually not council land, that's state land. And so we're working really closely with QPWS, the state government, on feral deer monitoring. So we're essentially being able to map our land at the same time as we're monitoring their land. So we're not getting that cross-tenure kind of crossing with deer. So the main reason we do this is so we can make evidence-based decisions on our investment. And that obviously gives us leverage to get funding. So that's a big one for us. And then most people will realise that we have a Biosecurity Act here in Queensland. And so what we need to do is we need to blend policy, tech and practical conservation matters. And so with the policy, the City of Gold Coast has a biosecurity plan, and that trickles down to management plans and operational plans. And so it's about bringing all that together, partnering with tech, and then also coming down to the practical side of things too. We also, obviously, as I just mentioned, collaborate with other levels of government, NGOs and private enterprise. So, for example, currently we have 2 contractors that are working with us on the monitoring side of things. So they're up flying drones, getting the data, and that's really important to have those relationships. So I talked a little bit before about methodologies, and so this is just the example that we used, or is the methodology that we used for feral deer management. So it's a modified version of Dr. Peter Fleming. He's from New South Wales. He works for the New South Wales government. So he's done a fair bit of research on invasive species management. And what we've done is we've just adapted his research a little bit to fit our situation. So at the bottom there, you can see the planning steps. So you've got the problem definition, engage stakeholders, develop strategy, build capacity, and then create an action plan. And then you move up into monitoring and control programs. And then you analyze the data coming out of the monitoring. And if everything's working well, you just stay in that cycle. But as soon as something changes and there's a problem, be it stakeholders, there's issue with stakeholders, objectives are wrong, you need to increase capacity, then you go back to the planning side, adjust a little bit, and then go back into the cycle. So it's a real adaptive framework. It's a really cool AI pick, I thought. That took me about 2 seconds. So in terms of technology and action, so as I've mentioned, we're currently using thermal imaging. We're using drones and thermal imaging and AI to monitor feral deer. As I mentioned, we've got 2 contractors who are doing a great job. And then I think most people will understand about how drones work, but essentially, just to put it in layman's terms, you've got a pilot and they have a visual line of sight. So at the moment, under CASA or civil aviation law, most of the time you're required to still have it within visual line of sight, the drone, when you're monitoring. However, I've got there beyond visual line of sight, or BV loss. That's another strategy that's going to be used in the coming years. And essentially what you can do is apply to the Civil Aviation Authority, CASA, for a license to go beyond visual line of sight. And you can just imagine that productivity is going to skyrocket as soon as we're able to start using contractors who have this capability. And so a couple of our contractors we're talking to, and they're talking about BV loss, and that's really exciting for us because, productivity increases, costs decrease, we can just do more with less, which is really exciting. And then in terms of AI and machine learning, I think that's been talked about quite a bit, but essentially some of our contractors are saying they're able to get up to 80% accuracy with their models, which is really exciting. And one of our contractors, what we've got them to do this round, that we've just done this winter, is still use the manual methods. So obviously getting someone to actually look at the distributions and look at the different populations within the maps that we're getting, or the GIS that we're getting, and then compare that with the AI version and see how we're doing in terms of that development with the AI. But the idea is that that number's just going to keep going up and up. So that's really exciting. We also do use drones for other things within our program, fire ant bait distribution and areas where it might be hard for ground officers to go in and distribute bait. And then also for our mosquito larviciding program to freshwater areas where, again, it's difficult for the team to get in on foot or by ATV or Argo for that matter. And then this is my favourite bit. which is looking into the future, and it's the tech that's on the way or is right on the horizon. Potentially other parts of the world are using it. So BV loss, I've talked about that, beyond visual line of sight. Then you've got drone-in-a-box systems. This is literally just cutting-edge technology. It's only come out in the last year or two. So the top photo there, you can see that's a DJI system, drone-in-a-box. It's got a weather station on it. So the idea is that you've got a drone station. It's mounted on the station. It's charging, and that station can close, and it's fully weatherproof. And then the drone can go out, that system's stationary on a site. You'd have to obviously have electrical connection. And that drone can go out, do its job. In this case, it would be feral air monitoring. And then it can come back, charge, and then go back out into the environment. And so you can start to imagine if you have 3 or 4 of these set up next to each other, you can start to think, well, you could have a fully autonomous system going 24/7. And then you start looking at autonomous vehicles. So you've got Waymo in the US, which is a autonomous taxi system that's been running for a year or two, fully autonomous. And then you've also got Elon Musk's robotaxi, which is just rolling out in Austin, Texas. And so they're fully autonomous cars, vehicles, and that's happening now. So it's only a matter of time before this technology comes to Australia. And then you start to think about how you can combine those technologies. So you can see the photo at the bottom there is where they've got a couple of those drone-in-a-boxes set up on a vehicle, probably not an autonomous vehicle yet, but you can just start to imagine when these technologies merge together, we're just going to see this huge improvement in productivity. And you have humanoid robots, which some of you may have seen the videos. I've got one coming up next, so that's pretty cool. And then fully integrated wildlife monitoring is kind of like the holy grail. So you're just not thinking about feral deer there, you're thinking about all invasive animals, and then you're also thinking about priority species. So imagine if we could have a system like this where we could bring, we could monitor everything at once. Pretty exciting. And then, so till now, I've really been talking about monitoring largely, but obviously there's this big part of invasive animal management, which is control, the control side of things. And so there's some, I guess, land to cover in terms of how we're going to get there in the future, because you start thinking about lethal control, which becomes pretty complex in terms of how you do that, particularly with things like drones and autonomous systems. So there's going to be some major policy hurdles moving forward, and systems that we're going to have to develop around that for safety. So won't be going down that sticky slope at the moment. So this is a Tesla Optimus autonomous robot, and so this is not CGI. I did quite a bit of research to make sure it wasn't CGI, so enjoy. It's incredible. It's kind of got that giggle factor, but it's just the dexterity is just unbelievable. The dexterity and range of movement. So you can imagine, when this gets released on the world, and I think it is a matter of if not when, it's going to revolutionize not just invasive species management, but everything. You can just imagine. Now, in terms of the benefits that this type of tech's going to bring, well, there's really obvious benefits. So health and safety to workers is a big one. These systems are going to be able to get to places that, it's dangerous for humans. And then also there's going to be obvious greater monitoring coverage and just driving down costs. Reduced environmental impact. So, for example, we currently use Argos that go into some of our wetlands, and obviously by replacing those with drones and things like that, then we can reduce those environmental impacts. And then the scalability of these systems is just incredible. So you can imagine if you came up with a solution for one area, then that can just be replicated over and over again to right across the country and right across the world. And then the big one is increased productivity. And some of the challenges that we're going to be facing, some of the things that are going to hold us back, the obvious one that's been talked about is resourcing, influence and advocacy. So again, it goes back to that leadership. So if we can, use our story and our why to influence people, and particularly decision makers and the people that hold the purse strings, then that's really important. And that's one of the things that tends to hold us back. The immune response to change. Now, this is an interesting one. It's kind of like people see technology and, get fearful. And I understand that response, but, this is something that is coming. We've always had technological change, rapid change, and hopefully it's going to bring really positive things, particularly in the nature space. One of the challenges is slow policy. Obviously, I've been in policy, environmental policy, for a few years, and I totally understand the grind. It takes years and years to develop policy or change policy. So that's a big challenge. And then all of these, in my mind, are just leadership problems. And then finally, circling back to the start, the three key messages that I really want to leave with you today is the challenge, that's invasive species management. And essentially, effective leadership is the big challenge. We need more leaders in the space, and I'm hoping there's lots of leaders here that are going to take up that challenge. Excellent methodologies exist. You saw the one that we've used. You just got to look and try and find one that will be appropriate to your problem. And then finally, the opportunity. This is the big one. Combining existing methods with new technology and great leadership, we can really drive protecting our environment and repairing nature fast. So change is coming. Let's lead it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Hadley. Any questions for Hadley?
I was just wondering, so that's a lot of the monitoring information about how you go about and improve what we can do for monitoring invasive species. What are we currently doing for controlling deer, for example, on the Gold Coast? So what are the techniques and procedures you're currently using?
So trapping and ground shooting are the two main techniques that are used, fairly old school, but there's not really a lot of better stuff at the moment. There are some developments, but it's very kind of practical, I guess. And so, yeah, it's an area that's fraught with controversy.
This is a little bit left field, but how do you go communicating to the public around what all these drones are and dropping aerial baits and the conspiracy theories that must come from that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So we have to think pretty carefully about that. So we generally have a range of things that we do before we even put a drone up. So we have checklists, and those checklists are things like notifying our call centre that they should expect lots of calls to come in, and having a run sheet. So we have a run sheet to say, hey, this is what's happening. This is the why. This is why we're doing what we're doing. But then also putting things out on social media, having alerts on our webpage, and then also what we do, because we often get people running up to our drone pilots and going, what the heck's going on? We've just seen your drone in the air at midnight when it's cold and dark. And so what we do is we brief our pilots and we give them a handout to say, hey, here's a letter from the City of Gold Coast, have a read, and then usually they're pretty happy after that. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.